Hey everyone. Sha, thank you so much for coming here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited about it.
And Sha, for those who are unfamiliar with you, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, so I guess the short way I've been explaining what I'm up to these days is I teach AI. And so it's been a long time coming, a long journey. So I got my undergrad in physics, which might be surprising to some people. But a lot of physicists ended up in AI for whatever reason. So I guess I'm just one of those. After doing my undergrad, I actually worked at my dad's car dealership for a year and a half. So, we're Persian. And if you're not familiar with, if you don't know any Persians, they're either in the rug business or in the car business. So my dad was in the latter half. But the formative thing there was I really got a taste of what it was like to be an entrepreneur and to run a small business and to be having many hats and kind of scrambling, trying to survive. So that's maybe where I first got the itch, just like growing up, watching my dad run his business and then actually working and operating in that business. But after some time, I wasn't really satisfied with my understanding of the world. I had this piece of paper that said, I understand physics. I understand how the world works, and I did not feel like I understood anything about how the world works. So I decided to go back for my master's degree, and then during that time, I discovered this thing called research, which I had no experience with before, but it was really fun because we were working on interesting questions, working with like new innovative technologies, and that's when I first got into AI and machine learning, data science. And the research we were doing was just so interesting. I just stuck around for the PhD. So I tell people I accidentally got a PhD because it wasn't really part of the plan. So I did that for 4 years. I was in grad school, and then I graduated and went and worked as a data scientist at Toyota. So I got my first big boy job, and it was a big change. So I was making like 2 grand a month as a research assistant, and then I was making like over 10 grand a month as a data scientist. So it was a big change. However, after doing that for a year, I realized working a corporate job wasn't really aligned with my long term goals. Kind of like going back, growing up watching my dad be an entrepreneur, half my family, they all have businesses. So it just didn't, working for someone else didn't really seem aligned with the future I saw for myself. So 13 months ago, I left that role and I've just been trying to survive ever since, doing a lot of different things. So coming from like an education background, coming from a research background, that seems to be where I've landed right now, making YouTube videos, writing blog articles, doing private trainings for companies. But this is kind of where I'm at right now, trying to pay the bills, and then working on some side projects, some software companies like AI software companies to hopefully build something that doesn't require so much of my time, so much of me showing up and like giving lectures and things like that. So that may have been a long-winded answer, but that's me in a nutshell.
No, I like it. Can you share your beginning in artificial intelligence, please?
Yeah, so it all started in grad school, and what that was is I took a course with someone who ended up becoming my research advisor, so Dr. David Laurie, and he's been doing machine learning for decades at this point. He was like one of the first people to do it at NASA, and we were working on some uh, well, we were doing interdisciplinary research. So I'll put it that way. So we're bringing data from all different domains together, and we're using machine learning and AI to try to make sense of the relationships between these different domains. So we had like satellite imagery. We were measuring responses from the human body with like EEG, which measures brain activity. We were looking at eye tracking, ECG, which is measuring heart activity, sweat response. So everything from the body. We also had environmental sensors. So we were measuring air quality. We were measuring light and light spectra. We were looking at temperature, pressure, humidity. So basically anything you might think of measuring, we were measuring it, and we were bringing them together in, just exploring a lot of different questions. So that's where I first learned the power of like machine learning and AI, because when you think of the environment and you think of the human body, these are two incredibly complex systems. And we don't have a firm physical theory of how these things work and interact because it's just too complicated. But this is where machine learning and AI can help, because you don't necessarily need to have a, you don't need to have a theory that explains all the interactions. If you have enough data, you can bring it together and build these machine learning models, and that can start to give you clues about, how these different systems interact.
And what was your tech stack at the moment?
When I was doing research,
yes, in the past,
we were doing mostly everything in MATLAB. So that's it's a that's a popular library in the academic space. So yeah, we would buy sensors, or we would build sensors ourselves. We would create the data pipelines, and then we would analyze everything in MATLAB. So it was a lot of things were done from scratch.
And when did you discover Python?
That was about that was my second semester of grad school. So I took a course on complex networks and systems, something like that. And part of that course is, we had to use Python. So I had to learn it in 3 months, which was actually not as difficult as I thought. Like Python was this big, scary thing. And then taking that course, I just realized it wasn't as scary as I thought. And I think that's just most things in life. Before we actually, spend a little bit of time, not even a bunch of time, even like 1 hour of watching a lecture or reading a nice article can unlock a brand new thing that sounded scary and sophisticated. So that's where I first discovered Python. And that's really become the go-to thing I use now, because like after I graduated, I lost the academic license of MATLAB, so I'm not going to pay $1,000 a year for that. So I just do Python, and then all the machine learning frameworks use Python, and there's such a vibrant open source community. So for anyone trying to get into AI, you should learn Python.
Of course. But have you ever used R?
No. I mean, very minimally. So there are some handy libraries in R for doing causal discovery and causal inference stuff, which, I'm not sure how familiar your audience is with that, but that's just a set of analytical techniques that, you might use in science or data science or something like that. And it's really all about not just asking like, what are the correlations between two variables, but what are the causal relationships between variables? So not just does A correlate with B, but does A cause B? So just interested in those causal questions. So I did some light R, like I wasn't writing programs or anything. I was more like hacking things together and like just running libraries and stuff like that. But I know R is very popular in the statistical and econometrics communities.
Sure. Can you share your experience in Toyota?
Yeah, sure. So I was in Toyota Financial Services. So Toyota is a massive global company, obviously, one of the richest companies in the world. But there's a smaller company within that umbrella called Toyota Financial Services. And what they do is they sell people money so they can buy cars. And I guess there are a lot of reasons why you would want that as like a separate entity, just for like legal reasons and things like that. Not completely sure. But basically what we do at Toyota Financial Services, people were applying for loans, and the key decision is, should you give this person money? And if you do, what interest rate should you charge? Like that's the whole business. And so the core thing you do as a data scientist at a financial services company like that is you build these so-called credit risk models. So all that is a, let's say, algorithm that you put in a customer's information. So they fill out a credit application or something like that. you put in customers' information, and then out comes a prediction of how likely they are to not pay the loan back if they were to get a loan. And that's the whole thing. And then you use these credit risk models in 100 different ways, and they can help support your decision making and just help you build a much more robust and scalable financial services company. Because if a person had to manually review every single loan that came in, every single credit application that came in, you would be very slow. You wouldn't be able to do as much business.
How important was ethics in that job?
There are tremendous regulations in financial services. And so this wasn't something I specifically worked on. And that's one thing you'll find at big companies, that you'll typically get put into a very specialized role. You won't be like touching all aspects of the business, which is one of the reasons I like entrepreneurship. But yeah, so there are a tremendous number of regulations, and if there's any kind of like disparity in how the loans were given, even if completely unintentional, and that's like the nuance here. These are all automated systems making these like credit decisions, and so even if you don't put in any variables that might discriminate against protected classes, like you don't put in things like gender, you don't put things like race, you don't put things like whatever, these variables might correlate with variables that you do care about, like maybe such as income, zip code, other, maybe even the type of car that they're buying. So these might loosely correlate with some of these other variables that you're not allowed to make loan decisions on, and then inadvertently the systems might be biased down the line. And that's just something that happens. And so someone who was working on my team, my coworker, that was his whole thing. He was trying to he was automating this auditing system that would figure out, okay, when would the model go wrong, and what is like the kind of the upside and downside. So like if you kind of artificially make the model, kind of nerf the model in a way, so you make it less predictive by trying to put in less information so it doesn't discriminate against different classes, it's going to be less predictive, so it's going to be a less effective model. However, if you make it more predictive, but then it inadvertently like discriminates against some protected class, then you have to pay some fine down the line. So it's really good to know like the trade-offs here, like the pluses and minuses. But yeah, so that's a big area in financial services and in other other aspects of AI.
And what was your tech stack in Toyota?
Yeah, so Toyota, we mainly use Python. We had just like SQL servers. So it was a handful of different servers. And then when I was leaving, there was this transition to like Snowflake, so more modern like data warehouse things. And then also using AWS like SageMaker. So SageMaker is really handy for data scientists because we love notebooks for whatever reason. Well, yeah, I guess there is a good reason, because a lot of times you're just like doing exploratory stuff and you're just doing analysis. You want something quick, so it's nice to do it in a notebook. We're not really writing, applications or more sophisticated pieces of software. And so SageMaker just allows data scientists to work in that environment and then push models to like a model registry or like create a feature store or something like that, and helps people build those ML pipelines a bit easier. But yeah, so that was the basic tech stack. It's like we had SQL servers and we had some like Python, and when we use Python to access the data and do things. And then there was like this push from like to Snowflake and then using SageMaker.
And when did you decide to leave?
That's a good question. So I feel like pretty quickly, like I knew that this wasn't going to be long term, and I actually wanted to leave after 6 months. I was like, like I shouldn't waste any time. Like I need to get
Okay.
started on this thing right away. Um, but my dad said, just stay at least a year, and I was like, okay, why not? Just do 1 year. I guess 6 months doesn't look great on a resume, but I guess that doesn't really matter when you're pursuing entrepreneurship. um, but I do think that was good because it allowed me to wrap up some projects and it left me at a good spot where I was transitioning from one project to another. So it wasn't like I was leaving in the middle of something. Like there was this clean break. And so it wasn't too overwhelming for the other people on my team. It was actually probably quite seamless. Um, so yeah, after 12 months in that role, I officially made that decision to leave.
Okay, and can you share your first day like entrepreneur?
Well, it was my first day as a full-time entrepreneur. But to be fair, I've been doing stuff like this for a while as like side hustles. So in grad school, started doing two things. One, I started doing the content. So I was writing blogs on Medium, making YouTube videos, and also I was doing freelance work on the side. So I was on Upwork, applying to jobs, and I got a couple of gigs doing more like research type stuff, but using the like data science skills. So like one was building a like sepsis classification model. So sepsis is this autoimmune disease. People come into the ER and their organs start failing, and it's just their immune system's confused. Um, so like building stuff like that. So it still wasn't like business stuff like what I was doing at Toyota. So it's still like research, but it was more it was like the data science skills and like things that a data scientist would typically do. Um, so I'd been doing that for several years. At this point, I think it's been 4 years since I started my YouTube channel, and then probably 3 years since I got my first gig on Upwork. So to say that it was like, okay, I just like left and started over, I don't want to give people that impression because I think it's also important to be like realistic of like how to make that transition. And I think another important point is that I had 1 year of runway, like 1 year of expenses in savings when I left. And that's, been tremendously helpful because the more runway you have, the bigger risks you can take and the more options that you have. If you only have like 3 months of runway, then once you leave your job, you can't really take that many risks. You have to go into something that can generate revenue pretty quickly. And that's probably going to be like freelancing or something like that. But I was doing that for like the first 6 months. I was looking for clients. I wasn't going on Upwork. I think the big change for me was, hey, let me just try to get contracts through my own personal brand and other social media channels. But then after doing that for a while, I just realized that I don't really enjoy doing that work. I don't enjoy solving other people's problems, which was probably the fundamental issue at working at Toyota. Like if I'm going to work very hard, um, it's hard for me to do that towards someone else's dream. If I'm going to kill myself to get something done and be uncomfortable and be growing, like I might as well put that energy into my own dreams and the things that I want to achieve. So there's just like some fundamental tension with doing freelance work and building projects for other people. And then also there are just some aspects of consulting that don't really, like, the incentives aren't always aligned in consulting. So if you're just billing hourly, like you're not really like the way you get paid the most is if you move as slow as possible and you have like the least quality work as possible. And I just don't like to operate like that. And there's also a massive like sales aspect to consulting, which I'm not saying like that's a bad thing. It's just very it's one of my biggest weaknesses, like sales and communication. I've definitely come a long way, but if you saw me in grad school as like a nerd physicist, and even still, like there's a lot of room for improvement when it comes to my communication and sales. But the trouble with that is, like, if I'm talking about like how can I have the highest leverage given my current skill set, it doesn't necessarily make sense for me to go in a direction that requires me to be really good at sales. Like, yeah, I'll develop that skill very quickly, but I'll probably have less results. I'll make less impact, I'll generate less value than in another direction that uses skills that I'm more my uses my skills that are more developed, like such as like my technical skills, my programming skills, and things like that.
So at the moment, you are working in your own project?
Yeah, so I'm doing actually a lot of things. And I recently wrote a blog, I made money like 9 different ways over the past 12 months, like my first year as an entrepreneur.
Nice.
And that might sound like a great thing on paper, but if you're making money in like a bunch of different ways, especially early on, that's a signal that you haven't found something that works. And that's where I'm at right now. I just haven't found anything that is like that one thing I can go all in on yet. So, it's like I don't remember all of them off the top of my head, but I'll just try to list them off. So it was like my Medium blog made money, doing consulting engagements was another way. My YouTube channel generated revenue. I have the option for people to book like one-off consultations with me, like on my website. Let's see. I did the B2B workshop, so doing a training for companies, AI training for companies. Let's see. I did a book review. So there was a book called Causal Inference in Python, and they wanted reviewers, so I reviewed that, and they paid me and sent me a book. Let's see. And then I did one brand collab with a brand on YouTube. So that's typically how most content creators make money. They do these collaborations with brands. And I think I missed one, but all that to say is like, so I made money in a lot of different ways, which isn't necessarily a good thing. Really, it's good if like, one thing made like, I don't know, $100,000 and everything else is like peanuts compared to that. Or like one thing made $1 million, like that's the real dream. And then everything else is peanuts compared to that. Because like once you have that, then it doesn't make sense to waste your time with everything else. Like, for example, if I made $100,000 on Medium last year, which is where I write my blog, it wouldn't necessarily make sense to like keep doing like the ad hoc consulting calls, or to do consulting engagements, or to do brand deals, or all these other small things that come up, because like that's what's giving me the greatest leverage on my time. So I'm still doing things like that. Okay, so yeah, that was last year. But when it comes to like what I'm doing right now, I'm still writing articles. I'm still doing the YouTube videos. I still do the ad hoc calls. What I'm really trying to figure out now is how to sell like AI trainings to companies, because it aligns well with what I'm already doing. So, for example, like I make a YouTube video and all my content is educational. So it kind of gets into like the technical weeds of AI, but also like the high level overview of like key concepts and stuff. And so I can repurpose a lot of that content to do these like custom trainings, custom AI trainings for companies. And then the great thing about doing a training for a company as opposed to doing a consulting engagement is that I'll retain the intellectual property of that training. So then I can take whatever I make for that company, then I can post it again on YouTube and then get more leads and get more AI trainings. Or I could go give a talk at a conference, or I can talk about it on a podcast, or anything like that. It just gives me a lot more options and flexibility. So I need to figure out how to make that work, and I haven't really cracked it yet. So that's in progress. Another thing I've been exploring is, instead of doing this B2B offer, so selling trainings to companies, looking at B2C offers. So like doing trainings for individual consumers. And then there are a few ideas there. One thing I've been playing around with a lot recently is like a AI builders boot camp. So not so the idea here is like having a small cohort, like 4 people, and just like simulating what it's like to work, at its, an engineering team or a data science team at a company. It's like you have a tech lead or a manager, and then you have like a set of like individual contributors. Each individual contributor's working on their own project, and then they kind of collaborate, and then the tech lead will give mentorship and guidance and help get them unblocked on the project. So because AI, it's so massive. Like there's no shortage, and even if you spent your life studying it, you're not going to learn everything. You're not even going to get close to learning everything. I think the most effective way to learn it is by doing, and that's really what I want to tap into with this, this AI Builders Bootcamp. So yeah, I'm just exploring that. I made like a landing page and I've like shared it privately with people, but I haven't launched that yet. So I'm still trying to get a sense of the like how to frame it and craft it and things like that. The last thing I'm working on, which is more kind of forward looking, long term, it's not something that'll make any revenue in the near term, is a startup idea with a couple of other co-founders. And it's basically using AI to help companies make more engaging advertisements. So it's not something that'll like save the world and or anything like that, but it is something that could provide value to a lot of businesses. And one of the co-founders, she's had, this is her domain, this is her industry, like advertising. She's been doing it for over a decade. And then we have another person who's like a product person, and then I'm the technical person, understands AI. So it's a nice combination of people. Like we all have completely different areas of expertise. So it's really nice if we can come together and work effectively, because then we can learn a lot from each other. So it's a lot, and that I feel is just the nature of being an entrepreneur in the early days, because you don't know what's going to work.
Yes.
If you knew, you'd already have done it and you'd be successful and whatnot. And I was talking to a mentor a few months ago, several months ago at this point, and he was saying he's been there, done that. He's like exited 2 companies. One of them was an IPO, and now he just mentors people just to, I don't know, stay busy, not be bored, I guess. But he said there are like 2 stages in an entrepreneur's journey. The first stage is like the ADD phase, where you're just doing everything. Like you don't know what's like, you're just running around, touching everything, doing a million things. And that's part of the process. You do this until you find that one thing that finally works, and then you go OCD. He calls it the OCD phase, where you lock in on that one thing, and you go all in, and then that kind of dwarfs everything else that you're working on. So still, sadly, still in the ADD phase, but it's only been like 13, 14 months since I left my job. So I feel like 2 years is a reasonable time frame to finally get going on something, but we'll see. Might even probably take longer, 5 years, 10 years, who knows?
Oh my God, I have a lot of questions. So
Yeah.
let's go. How do you find clients, business
Yeah.
clients?
Most of my clients find me through YouTube. And yeah, so there are a lot of ways this has looked. So initially started on Upwork when I was in grad school. Another way when I was in grad school was my advisor, who's very well connected, and then he would bring me or connect me with opportunities. Then after I graduated, I was working at Toyota, and now doing full time. YouTube's been the main thing. And then I guess this is related to YouTube, but a lot of times what happens is people see my channel and then they connect with me on LinkedIn. And that allows me to do warm outreach. So that's what I've been doing for these B2B workshops, the private AI trainings for companies. I've just reach out to people, share a little bit about what the trainings involve, and then ask if they know anyone who might be interested. So those are So I guess if I were to list those, it would be like Upwork, which I guess is like a job platform, referrals through my advisor, like one to many through my YouTube channel, and then warm outreach through LinkedIn.
And customers?
The customers will vary. I've had, individuals like book time with me, and then have had all the way up to CEOs of like companies with thousands of employees. So it's a pretty broad spectrum. And I think part of that is because there's so much broad interest in AI and people are kind of scrambling to figure out what to do and how it works, which is good because it's like there's broad interest, but it's also bad because I haven't really found a clear customer avatar. I haven't found like a profile that can be like, oh, this is exactly the customer I need to go after, and I need to go all in. So it's another version of the ADD phase of entrepreneurship. But yeah, so I would say small to medium sized businesses mostly, and people who are coming to me for education, like AI education stuff. It's basically anyone who's not already an AI expert or doesn't already have. So this doesn't mean they're not technical. They could be technical just in a completely different domain, like IT, software development, um, whatever, like statistics. But they just aren't familiar with AI. And even if they are familiar with AI, maybe they're just not informed about this latest trend of like large language models, foundation models, multimodal AI, fine-tuning models, so on and so forth.
Okay, I'm going to share some small story with you.
Sure.
I have clients, sometimes people who reach me, and all the people ask me for AI. But when I see their problems at the end, maybe with a heat map, we can solve it. I don't know if you have the same problem, people who ask you for AI and at the end, only with analytics, can you solve it?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a famous Google machine learning framework. I think it's like the 40 rules of machine learning or something like that. So even before large language models, this is probably from like 10 years ago. The first rule is don't use machine learning. And if we transport that to today, the first rule of AI is not to use AI, And I think part of the problem, and it's not even a problem, it's just part of the situation, is that people hear AI and they think like automation, they think analytics, they think all sorts of things. Just basically anything a computer can do to make their life easier is kind of captured by this AI brand now. And that, I think that's part of like the challenge these days is like it may not be clearly defined, or maybe it is clearly defined, but it's not clear what people mean when they say AI, Because I personally have a pretty broad definition of AI, which is a computer's ability to solve problems and make decisions. But other people, when they say AI, they specifically mean like ChatGPT or a large language model or a large multimodal model or something like that. And so, kind of getting a sense, like getting an intuition of what people mean when they say that in conversation, I guess is a skill to develop. But yeah, absolutely. When people come to you with a problem, it's not about like what technology do I use. It's more about the problem, like how do I solve the problem, period. Whether that's even not even using automation or anything like that, just doing something like a one-off analysis where you make a heat map. And if it's not a problem they need to solve over and over again, there's no need to automate it and, use sophisticated technology. Like figure out the simplest solution possible to solve that problem so you can move on to the next thing.
And do you have any favorite algorithm?
What do you mean?
Yes, maybe linear regression, XBoost.
Oh, I see. It depends on the use case, So I guess my favorite would be in the context of solving a specific problem would just be, whatever solves the problem as effectively and quickly as possible. But I will say, like, broadly speaking, more philosophically, I I like decision trees a lot because they're intuitive and they can go pretty far as like predictive performance. Um, and you can still like have a sense of like how they work. Like maybe it's not as clear as a linear regression model, but you can still get a sense through like doing the predictor importance ranking and so on. But also that just might be because I've spent the most time with decision tree based methods. Like that's what we mainly used when I was in grad school for our projects. Um, but yeah, I would say decision trees and decision tree ensembles have a special place in my heart right now.
Oh, nice. And what's your future plans?
So I guess right now I don't really think too far into the future. Right now I'm just trying to survive. Um, but I guess there are like fuzzy long-term things as well. Um, So one, I have a community called the Data Entrepreneurs, which I started, at that 6 month mark at working at Toyota when I was thinking about leaving. I didn't leave, but instead I started the Data Entrepreneurs, which is like a community for people like me who are coming from this like data, ML, AI background. They probably work in a technical role or they work as a freelancer and they're trying to kind of keep moving in that direction of like becoming an entrepreneur in the space, or they're already entrepreneurs in the space and they're just looking for, social support from peers. So one long-term thing is I want to travel more with the Data Entrepreneurs because we do these in-person meetups every quarter. And so it's been somewhat limited, but so we just had one in Austin. We're going to Boston in October. No, November. Yeah, we're going to Boston in November. But I want to keep traveling. So like go to New York, go to London, go to Germany, go to LA, go to Canada, because we have members like all over the world. And so it'd just be great to like meet and connect with people. But I suppose the reason most people get into entrepreneurship, I feel, is for freedom. Because, smart people who like to work hard, it's kind of terrible to be in a full-time role, especially when it's so easy to be comfortable in a full-time role. Like most full-time roles, especially for capable people, like is easy. And at least for me, like I found it difficult to work hard, when I was working at Toyota, because I feel like it was just so easy. Like every month, no matter what I did, I would get this nice paycheck, like more money than I needed. Um, and I just didn't, I don't like that. Even though it feels good in the moment, long term, it's not good for you. You know what I mean? Like we need
Yeah.
to be uncomfortable. We need to be put under pressure and stress because, that's what we're made for. That's what humans are made for. They're meant to be mishandled. That's how they grow. Um, so I think just, yeah, I guess I was talking about freedom and then I started talking about discomfort. But I think that's kind of like what I value and what I want long term. The reason I like discomfort is because that's the recipe for growth. Like if you're uncomfortable, you're probably growing in some way, And the reason I like entrepreneurship is because you're constantly uncomfortable, so you're constantly growing, but you also have freedom. I mean, that's like the caveat that you could be uncomfortable in a full-time job, but you don't necessarily have the freedom and autonomy to kind of be the master of your own destiny. But in entrepreneurship, like you do, and maybe even to a fault, you know,
Yes.
like you really face the consequences of your decision. But I think that's just the way the world's supposed to be. Like you're supposed to, you're supposed to receive the feedback, the harm from your decisions if you make a bad decision. You're supposed to have skin in the game. But when you don't have skin in the game, I think it causes a lot of larger scale problems.
Nice. And do you have any advice for a data entrepreneur?
Start now. That's my go-to advice. Just start right now in whatever. If you want to become an entrepreneur, like long term, like, and you're not already, like you're working full time, just start right now, like whatever that looks like. So for me, I started like writing blogs on Medium and posting YouTube videos. I'm not saying like you should quit your job immediately. Like even just taking one baby step, toward the direction you want to go. Like if you have this vision of what you want your life to look like you have these goals and you aren't already living that life, just take one baby step in that direction. And that just comes down to starting as soon as possible.
So, Sha, thank you so much for coming here. And remember, if you are listening, please share the word. See you soon. Bye.